who else is doing this? No one. It's so like weird and silly, and they're just having fun with it. Keep some more respect to them, really, for going out and making this.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast, where we discuss the world of film from a fresh angle. And now your host, Robert Yanis Jr.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast. This is Rob. On this show, we democratize the film criticism conversation by bringing on fans and critics alike to dig into their personal connection to a current or classic release. This episode, we're going to be talking about the 2016 comedy Popstar Never Stop, Never Stopping from The Lonely Island, and I am honored to be joined by Sandro Falce of Oldie But a Goodie. So tell people a little bit. Tell people a little bit about your show and what you guys cover over there.
Yeah, so Oldie But a Goodie is hosted by myself and my good friend Zach. We've been doing shows since like 2012. We came up with this last year, where basically we decided to force ourselves to watch the entirety of 1994 and all the various films that came out then. So every week we have a look at what came out that week back in 94. We pick one, we watch it, we do a full synopsis review. A lot of them aren't very good, but we found some hidden gems and that sort of stuff. It's been it's been really fun so far. 94 is a strange year.
Yeah, was that kind of the rationale for selecting it, that there are so many films that we're still talking about, Lion King, Forrest Gump, Pulp Fiction, things like that, but then a lot of other ones that have basically fallen off the face of the earth?
Yeah, pretty much. That was pretty much entirely it. That and the fact that it was 25 years ago as well. So each episode is a bit of a celebration, I guess, for like 25 years of this film being around. That was the thinking there. Okay,
yeah. I just did an episode recently with someone who has a podcast called Awesome Movie Year. And the first year that they covered was 1994, and now they're doing 2007. So yeah, there is this podcast, especially, I've been talking a lot about the films of 1999. It's 20 years later. It's kind of in the ether. But 1994 is I think really fascinating, kind of underrated in that regard, as far as the range of films that came out that year. And, I was a 11-year-old in 1994. So I remember seeing not Pulp Fiction, but like The Mask and The Lion King. And like there was a lot of big movies that came out that year. So that must be fun for you to go. And I guess, how many of these movies are you revisiting, or a lot of them, or are most of them new watches for you?
A lot of the heavy hitters I've seen before. Right. So like Shawshank, as you mentioned, Pulp Fiction, Lion King, Forrest Gump, that sort of stuff. True Lies was a favorite of mine from my teenage years. I say that being as it was not long ago at all, but but there have been a lot of stuff that I've been discovering for the first time. A couple of films that I really didn't expect to enjoy as much as I did were like My Girl 2, which was a sequel to a coming of age film from like 92, I want to say. And that was really cool to discover that. The River Wild most recently was a very weird kind of action thriller with like horror elements set on a river with Kevin Bacon.
Like Meryl Streep's only like major blockbuster like action. It's like the only time she tried her hand at being an action hero, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, just stuff like that, just kind of going through the year. And we kind of, the way we explain it is like we're gold panning. Like we're searching for films that no one remembers, films that no one's talking about, films that probably no one even saw. I mean, we've done heaps of films where they've made 1 million in the box office and that's about it, and no one talks about them. So it's just kind of, just finding stuff like that really has been really, really fun.
And then you have smaller films like Clerks that made very little, only a few million or whatever at the box office, and have gone on to become cult classics. I mean, as of this recording earlier this week, Kevin Smith said he announced that he's doing Clerks 3 again. I mean, I said that before, but we'll see if it actually happens this time. It's these movies that have become a little indie darlings and then developed into kind of more mainstream franchises down the line. So that's kind of a fun concept. Did you come up with the year first and then fine tune the concept for the show, or did you come up with the idea and then we're like, well, what would be an interesting year to cover that we haven't, maybe that you hadn't seen a lot of the movies of too as well?
Yeah, I pretty sure we came up with the concept first, and then the year was actually pretty late in the process as well. We came up with the title and even had the artwork before we decided on 94. But that really was it. Was like we wanted a year that wasn't so recent or like too far away. We wanted something in like that sweet area where we could get a lot of nostalgia, I guess. And 94 was a perfect year for that. So, I mean, the Lion King as well. We were definitely influenced by the fact that the Lion King remake came out this year. So we would have a chance to talk about it in that way because we kind of compared the two a lot. Yeah, that was pretty much the major reasons, I guess. We didn't think about it as hard as some people think that we did, which I find really funny.
Well, no, because I think, you hit on the perfect year as far as the balance of films, as far as the 25th anniversary, and it's recent enough that, as you said, with the Lion King remake, like everybody is still steeped in 90s nostalgia, so you kind of have that built-in audience already going for it. But yeah, that's cool. So did you start this in January and you're just going through the whole year? Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's it.
That's exciting.
From January to December, who knows what year 2 is going to be. We have a very silly idea about rolling a pair of dice to find out what year we're doing. But who knows whether that will happen. That's a couple months away.
Yeah. That's awesome. Very exciting. So definitely, listeners, check out that podcast, and I'll be curious to see what year you guys cover next. Just because there are so many, I love the idea of going back into I'm actually reading a book now about 1999 and kind of going through the year like season by season and like with interviews with the filmmakers and the actors and things like that. And I think it's really fun to go back and kind of take a snapshot of a particular year in cinema history, even though, we're also kind of living through one now, obviously. So it's like, it's fun to imagine what we're going to be saying about 2019 as a year in cinema, 25 years down the road, and going back a couple of decades kind of puts that in perspective a little bit. And like the way that these films kind of shape culture as they go along, and the way that the appreciation grows or diminishes over time. So that's a very cool idea. So definitely love that.
It's really interesting to see which films were hits and which were misses as well. Like the Coen brothers film from March, I want to say, completely bombed, but it's so much better than a lot of the other stuff that we've done, which is like really, really interesting. Like recently we did The Specialist, a Sylvester Stallone film that made all of the money, but it's the first time I had ever heard of it. So stuff like that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually kind of in a way a good segue, because the movie we're talking about here is a movie that nobody saw 3 years ago, but I feel like is already kind of starting to gain momentum. So I think that's kind of a good transition. We're going to be talking about Popstar Never Stop, Never Stopping this episode. So let's listen to a little bit of the trailer right now.
My fans and me, we're in love.
I write the songs that make the whole.
The arena is our bedroom. And the stage is where we fuck.
Connor for real is actually saving the record industry.
Connor's hot.
You tell me you didn't see him and say, he's the star.
This guy right here, he's gonna make it big.
It's Connor. I've got it all, and I'm getting more. Adam Levine's hologram. So expensive.
Connor currently has 32 people on his personal payroll.
Sure, Connor surrounds himself with people who are agreeable.
That was a little bit of the trailer for Popstar Never Stop, Never Stopping, directed by Akiva Schaffer and Jorma Taccone. Obviously, 2/3 of The Lonely Island. So before we get into the movie, what are your overall thoughts on The Lonely Island? Are you a big fan of their music and their comedy and their roots on SNL and things like that?
Oh yeah, massive fan. I've been a huge fan of all three of them for a while. I think it was actually Zach, the co-host from Oldie Buddy Goodie, who got me onto them in the first place as well, back when Turtleneck and Chains came out, their second album. Right. I think they were still on SNL at that point. I'm not sure.
I believe so. Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of musical comedy, that sort of stuff. And so as soon as I heard that these guys existed, I was pretty much an instant fan. I started watching a bit of like Samberg's run on SNL when I first heard of them, that sort of stuff as well. So I really got into them. And this is an interesting film as well, because I feel like up until that point that this was their most consistent range of songs. I think I would say the soundtrack is probably their most consistent album, only beaten by the one they put out a couple months ago, the Bash Brothers one.
I love that. I love that. The Bash Brothers one is awesome. I've watched that the Oakland Nights video with Sterling K. Brown lip syncing Sia like more times than I'd care to admit. But yeah,
good. It's so good.
That's I mean that's pretty much how they've come across most people's radars through SNL. But I remember 2006 when they had the Dick in a Box, and then shortly thereafter Jizz in My Pants and I'm on a Boat. So I was kind of on board from the beginning. And like you said, I'm a big fan of musical comedy. Weird Al Yankovic, Flight of the Conchords, obviously Lonely Island, Garfunkel and Oates. Like there's a bunch of really great comedy duos, or Tenacious D. I can't believe I didn't mention them earlier yet. There's a lot of really great acts out there who, you know, some of them, even like Tenacious D, like you change the lyrics to their music. That's like, that could be legit rock music, you know, like that's the quality of the production is really there in a lot of these artists. And I think The Lonely Island have really ridden that whole, lame white rapper kind of thing. That was their shtick for the first couple albums. And I think more recently, like with this soundtrack, they do touch on a lot of different, they stretch a little bit more in like their style a little bit, and there's a little bit of like early 90s throwback with the Style Boys thing, and there's a little bit of diversity as far as themes and topics and things like that. So but yeah, I think you're right on the money with that. Their first couple albums, they have a lot of great stuff on them, but there are always a couple of tracks where you're like, yeah, I don't know what they were trying to do with this. But I mean, but that's also comedy in general. You throw things out there and some of it works, some of it doesn't. You fine tune as you go along. So that being said, since you're already a fan of theirs, did you see this when it came out in June 3rd, 2016 in theaters, or did you discover it later down the line?
It never got released in theaters in Australia.
Oh, really?
Because it didn't do very well.
That's terrible.
In America, they were like, "Well, we're just going to completely pass over here. Just go straight to home release." So I saw it as soon as the home release came out. I think it was the day of, and yeah, loved it. I was a massive fan straight out the gate because I was a little skeptical going in because I'm a fan of Hot Rod, but a lot of their not musical stuff I don't love when they're a trio. I remember seeing a pilot they did in like 2012, I think it was, that I really didn't like that much. So I was a little skeptical going into the film. But as soon as it started, as soon as you heard that opening Adam Levine song, I'm So Humble, I was like, yeah, no, this is good.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of had, here it was released theatrically, obviously, but not for very long. So my wife and I did see it, I think probably even opening weekend. And I think it was us and like a couple other people in the theater. And I was like, well, that does not bode well at all. Because being a Lonely Island fan, hearing that they were developing this movie it was initially just going to be called Connor for Real. And then it was just, this vague, we're doing like a satire or parody or whatever of pop music. And I was like, well, that sounds interesting. I'm all aboard for that. So I was kind of tracking its development little by little throughout, lead up to the release. And so I was really excited to see it. And I had a great time at the theater. And then the opening weekend numbers came out and it was, I don't know, like 2 million or something like that. It made a total of 9.6 million domestically. And I've been doing this version of the podcast with this concept of bringing different guests on different movies and all like that every week for about a year now. And this is definitely still one of the lowest grossing movies I've covered on.
Wow.
Here. I think it's this and Sing Street, which is another great, musical.
Oh, I love Sing Street.
Yeah, see?
I'm a massive fan of that.
And I feel like both of those movies made under 10 million at the box office, at least domestically.
Yeah.
And, have great music, great performances, totally different genre, obviously, but I feel like both of them are starting to gain momentum little by little. I mean, I've just heard recently, I think last week or something like that, I heard news that the Alamo Drafthouse on the West Coast is hosting like sing-along screenings of Popstar and things like that. Like I'm hearing that kind of stuff. I'm like, that's amazing. It's like people are starting to realize that, you know, it was on Netflix for a while. So I feel like people are starting to discover it, which, you know, makes me feel good because I have the bragging rights to be like, well, I saw it in theater. Where were you all?
Yeah, exactly.
It came out
Exactly.
and nobody went to see it. Are you kind of getting the sense that people are starting to like recognize it? Because even on Twitter, like I'm seeing every once in a while, anytime anybody tweets anything about Popstar, it's getting lots of retweets and lots of love. And that makes, you know, same thing for Sing Street, honestly.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I've had like heaps of friends just discover this film over the last year, probably due to Bash Brothers as well. Like that was on Netflix, I believe, and just blew up, and everyone was like, "Oh, have they done any other like narrative based stuff? You find this?" Yeah, I think you're definitely right. It's weird that it didn't get a lot of money though, because everything is there. You've got like Judd Apatow producing. That usually brings a lot of people out to the cinemas. This was the heights of Brooklyn Nine-Nine as well, and yeah, it's fascinating that it didn't make much. No, I think it's partially because they released it the beginning of June. I don't know if that's really the best place for it. I'm not sure off the top of my head what came out that Memorial Day weekend, but it was probably got crushed by some enormous movie. You know, it's probably a superhero movie. I'm sure Marvel or somebody had that slot in Memorial Day weekend. But yeah, no, I hear you about the Apatow thing. That usually lends the movie a lot of credibility, and there are so many cameos in here, which we'll get to in a little bit. So yeah, it's you know, it makes me feel good that it's starting to get some recognition and starting to develop a life of its own. So going into this, were you a big fan of mockumentaries, that kind of thing? Like, obviously, this is way inspired by things like This Is Spinal Tap and all the Christopher Guest movies that have followed. Is that something that you've been into or trying to or are interested in looking into? Because personally, I've seen a couple of those and I like them, but normally mockumentaries are not necessarily my favorite subgenre of comedy. I think this film helped me because I had an in with Lonely Island and with, you know, a lot of the people on it. So what are your thoughts? Yeah, I was into mockumentaries, but not in a huge way. I think up until when this came out, yeah, like Spinal Tap really was the only one that I was a massive fan of. I'm not sure if I saw Documentary Now before or after this. I'm pretty sure it was after. That's Fred Armisen and Bill Hader's a mockumentary series, which am a massive fan of at the moment. But stuff like that before Popstar, I'm not sure if I was huge into that subgenre. Although I think Sharknado released a making of mockumentary in like 2014 or something that I had a bit of fun with. But yeah, no, the same as you. I wasn't huge in that when this came out.
I feel like it's the kind of movie you have to acquire a taste for. You know, you have to watch them a couple of times to really appreciate the nuances in it. I'm thinking of something like What We Do in the Shadows, which is a great movie. But I think if you watch a mockumentary and you've never seen one before, I think you're more like, I don't get it. Like, it's in a way like so so quiet, so nuanced, so dry, and a lot of times that you're like, okay, I get that that's supposed to be funny, but I'm not like really feeling it. And I think that's, you know, maybe that's part of why people didn't really flock to this one too much, because they were like, wait, what is this? Is he what's going on? You know, maybe younger audience members, especially like a lot of the Lonely Island's fan base, were not necessarily super acquainted with that subgenre. I think that might be part of it, but yeah, no, I think it's also, not only is it, you know, a mockumentary about behind the scenes, but it's set in the world of pop music, and even the title is sort of a riff on the Justin Bieber Never Say Never, the like live concert behind the scenes thing that, like, I mean, Katy Perry had one, the cast of Glee had one. I mean, there was like a lot of that happening, you know, a few years ago. Not so much anymore. I feel like that's kind of died down, but but even those films are very niche in a way. So I think maybe it was kind of painting itself into a corner as we're going to be a mockumentary about a type of movie that a very specific audience is familiar with. And then, banking on the fact that people, know the Lonely Island and everything. So yeah, I think maybe that's part of it. That could be something.
That also makes me respect them more, though, that they just went ahead and made this, like similar to Bash Brothers.
And that's, I think, why this film is starting to endure, is that you can tell that this was clearly a passion project for them. I mean, there's no way it's not a franchise movie or anything. There's no way they were like, we'll do this. That's a sure thing. I'm like, is it though? And they're so committed to the gag that it really comes off on screen. And, we'll talk about Samberg's performance in a minute, but there's such an earnestness to the story. And you can tell that they called in every favor that they've amassed on SNL. Like, there's so many people that are in this movie, Justin Timberlake and Michael Bolton, and a lot of the artists that Adam Levine, like you mentioned, a lot of the artists that they've worked with either on other Lonely Island stuff or that they've appeared in worked on sketches with on SNL. Emma Stone, Oscar winner Emma Stone, is in this movie. In one of the more memorable songs for me, because as soon as this came out and I got the soundtrack on iTunes, I immediately was like, well, I need to learn that catchphrase verse.
Oh yeah,
Patrick Stewart money, that whole thing. So whenever I listen to that, I still have to sing along to that one. But they go all in here, and I think they assemble a really cool list of cameos. So what are some? There's so many. I mean, we only named like a few. What are some of the supporting and/or cameo roles that really stand out to you?
Number one is probably Seal, because it's so ridiculous. That whole wedding sequence is amazing. As you mentioned, Emma Stone, a really underrated singer, I'd say, should do it more. Put her in more musicals. Her verse, her chorus is fantastic. It's not really a cameo, but Chris Redd as well, because it felt like a cameo when he first came on, kind of parodying Tyler the Creator, and then you realize, oh wait, he's in this for a lot more, and he is also, as you were talking about before, he's also someone who I feel like people are starting to appreciate more now. Like, he was cast on SNL last year. I'm pretty sure he did some stand-up shows in Australia at the start of this year as well. So yeah, he's fantastic. And yeah, just Justin Timberlake is Mr. Fish. Very memorable.
I'm just glad you mentioned Chris Redd, because I was going to bring him up too, because he was one of, obviously a lot of the people in this movie, Maya Rudolph, Bill Hader, there's a lot of SNL connections, of course, because there tends to be the case they kind of run as a crew for different projects, which is great for me as a fan of SNL. And seeing this movie, he was one of the big discoveries for me, was Chris Redd. Like, that scene where, Connor's asking him if he switched out his costume so that his, he would expose himself to the audience. He's like, oh no, I didn't. Or maybe I did. Like, the thing he does with his eyes, things like that. So when I heard that he was cast on SNL, I was very excited, because I remembered him from this. And that's how much of a standout he is in this movie, where there's all these big stars. I think he has one of the most interesting parts, because he starts out as kind of a friend to Connor, and then develops into an arch nemesis sort of as it goes along. And this year, of course, he was bumped up to a full-time cast member on SNL. So I think that's really cool that it's been fun to see his career just blossom just in the last few years, since he made kind of a breakthrough performance in a movie that nobody saw. So it took a while more for the breaking through to actually happen. But yeah, I couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah. Some other cameos, I am a huge fan of Pharrell Williams in comedies, because when he's not in a comedy, he's very serious, and the way he talks about music, he's so passionate about it as well. And for him to bring that passion to Popstar Never Stopping in the interview segments is amazing, because he's so serious, but what he's saying is ridiculous, and you can tell that he would never say that in real life. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of his cameo as well. Snoop Dogg's in this. DJ Khaled just makes fun of himself as usual. That seems to be the recurring joke with DJ Khaled cameos. He was in another one recently as well. I think it was this year. I can't remember what it was called though. Maybe yesterday was he in that?
Oh,
can't remember.
Maybe.
But he seems to be making fun of himself a lot recently, which is a lot of fun. Good to see people do that. Paul McCartney, his one's pretty fun. Yeah, just a bunch of great cameos.
Yeah, it's Usher credits his dancing to Style Boys in the Donkey Roll.
That's right.
I love that we get a very quick cameo by Weird Al as the lead singer of Hammerleg, this like hard rock band, I guess, or whatever, at one of the award shows. Joan Cusack is in this. Like, you know, I also really think that Tim Meadows has a lot of really fun stuff to do in this film as one of the more prominent supporting roles as the manager. Harry, the fourth Tony of Tony, which is like a deep cut early 90s joke. I love that.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I'm so glad that joke made it. It's so good.
Of course, Will Arnett and the other people as the TMZ knockoffs, CMZ. That was amazing. Those are some of the. This movie has, it has kind of a range of gags throughout it. Those are probably some of the most over the top ones, I would say. Just like the way that the way that they're all so manic. I mean, that always really stands out to me as one of the complete balls to the wall moments in this movie. That you admire the fact that this made it into a major studio movie. This craziness with the TMZ parody. That's so great.
Oh, that is that's really good as well, and that translated well for me as well because TMZ is not really a huge thing over here, but it was still very funny, so it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I wanted to now go over to Andy Samberg and his performance, and I think what makes this movie work is that yes, Connor is the butt of the joke, and most prominently, but Samberg doesn't play him as a doofus per se. Or I mean, he's kind of a doofus, but he's not. There's nothing malicious in the character. You know what I mean? Like he is very pure of heart. He is very earnest. Like he's just trying to make good music and trying to make people happy and that kind of thing. And I think you can kind of relate to his struggle, even though you realize that he's completely going about things the wrong way and is not self-aware whatsoever. There's this joke that's on the soundtrack that I always think about. It's just like as one of my go-to examples of him trying to, connect with his fans, but doing it in completely ludicrous fashion where he's like, oh yeah, I have a new single. I'm going to be surprise releasing it next Thursday at noon. I'm like, dude. The fact that he has the whole song, the I'm Too Humble, which is probably easily in my top 3 best songs in the movie. And we'll obviously talk about the music shortly. How much do you think this movie would work if Samberg didn't hit that right balance between being kind of a buffoon, but also like a well-intentioned buffoon and someone that we can root for instead of being like, wow, this guy's an idiot. Like, why are we even watching him? I think that's so important.
Yeah, I think so. I think, if he did just play it as a very unlikable, perhaps even like pompous sort of performance, I don't think the music would really be something you just chuck on and listen to. Like for a start, like that's one great thing about like his performance and the way that he just even like speaks as a character. Like as you mentioned, like all his verses on I'm So Humble are just they're so like earnest, and like he really does believe in his music as well. Like everything that he says in the songs, it feels like he really means it, which I think just makes it even better, as you mentioned. He definitely easily could have just gotten it wrong. I was a little worried that he would just be playing the same character that he plays in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which I don't think would have worked in this too well. But yeah, he did a really good job at coming up with Connor.
I think what the smart thing that the movie does is that it's not even really making fun of him per se. It's in a way, it's not really even cynical about the musicians themselves. the Justin Biebers or the people like that, because it's more, if anything, the system around him and how he's got this inflated ego and the way his managers are. I mean, one of his reps has that idea about putting his music in the like random household appliances, which is kind of a riff on U2 and their album just randomly showing up in people's iTunes accounts from a few years ago. So things like that. It's like that wasn't his idea. It wasn't his idea to bring Hunter onto his tour and kind of sabotage it from within. He's just really out of touch and I think Equal Rights is probably the best example of that, where it used to have that at the end, and I think it's Ringo Starr at the end who's like, oh, it's like it's legal now, it's not a big deal. The fact that Connor he's trying to stand up for something and like be an activist, not realizing that his cause is already kind of moot at this point. And not only that, but then the way that the character is so representative of today's youth and coming up obsessed with like social media and their followers and image and fame and all that. I think it feels like the template for This Is Spinal Tap or something like that applied to today's world, today's music, and today in a very online centric society. And I think that's why I think it's probably going to stand the test of time in maybe not to the same level of This Is Spinal Tap because it was such a pioneer in that regard, but at least be in that conversation.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So let's talk about the music in this movie, which is obviously it's a musical. It's set in the world of music. So what are some of your favorite tracks as far as their role in the story, as far as just re-listenability, independent from the film itself, things like that?
I think Finest Girl is one of their best songs ever. It's very fun. That and like Mona Lisa as well. I listen to Mona Lisa a lot just by itself. Because one, it's funny, two, it's also true. So, she
does look like a Garbage Pail Kid, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. But like ones that really work with the story, Things in My Jeep has always stood out to me. The Linkin Park collaboration, mainly just because of the joke after it plays, where someone's like, it wasn't really a big hit because I had different things in my Jeep.
I feel like it's Nas. Is it Nas that says it? It might be at the end.
I think it might be. Yeah. So that's great. And Incredible Thoughts as well is such a it's the production on that song just makes it seem like it's so powerful, where what they're saying is completely ridiculous. I think that was one of the first songs that like really did that sort of production style as well. Like we've had a couple songs come out like that where it is very important sounding, very like arena filling sort of instrumentals, and then the lyrics are just ridiculous and don't mean anything. So that one as well I think is fantastic. And the donkey roll, of course.
Yeah, Incredible Thoughts is definitely one that stands out, not only because I love Jack Sparrow, the previous collaboration with Michael Bolton and Lonely Island, but because it does feel kind of encapsulative of Connor and what we just said about how he is so out of touch. He thinks he's coming up with these profound ideas. He's like, I'm gonna blow my fans' minds, blah blah blah. And meanwhile, we're like, yeah, this is not an issue, guy. we're past this. You need to get with it a little bit. And I think Incredible Thoughts that's entirely the premise of that song. And it's just then you have Justin Timberlake as Mr. Fish showing up, and I especially love the fact that Justin Timberlake is in this movie because now obviously he's been a huge part of the Lonely Island's popularity with the three collaborations that he did with them, but also that he was this kind of pop idol back in the 90s. So it's kind of coming full circle that he was in a boy band, back in the day. And it's kind of feels like a little bit of a meta commentary to have him in this movie.
Yeah, definitely. I was a little disappointed the first time I saw it that he wasn't a bigger part in the film as well. Just because, as you mentioned, I mean, his three collaborations, like him and Samberg really are a duo in their own right, I think. And for him to have what I guess you'd say is a cameo was a little disappointing for me the first time I saw it. But yeah, no, the stuff he does in this film is just fantastic in general. Like him as the chef and
lining up the carrots and like, yeah, super meticulous.
It's very, very fun. And just lyrics in that song, like TV is free, but what is the cost? It's just, it's so good. Yeah, the writing I think was particularly good on that song, as well as, what was the other one that I just mentioned? Oh yeah, as well as Maximus, which I'm not sure if it's really included in the film too much from memory. I mean, I just saw it a couple of days ago, and I can't remember if it was in the film, but it's one of my favorite ones on the soundtrack because it does pretty much directly parody Kanye West's 808s and Heartbreaks album. Like that auto-tuned singing and the auto-tuned crying especially is somehow beautiful and hilarious to listen to at the same time.
Yeah, I think they use it very briefly in the funeral scene, like for like a split second, maybe 5 to 10 seconds of it or something. But yeah, that's definitely one I think that flies under the radar. I really like "I'm a Weirdo" too, which again I don't even know how much that's in there, but that's like the catchphrase verse from "Turn Up the Beef." It's just one of those that's just really fun to like kind of sing along with, and it's short, so it's a quick hit. You're kind of in and out. But yeah, no, it's definitely one of my favorite albums by them, just because it's such a, every song it covers a different topic, and every song is just like, it's such a wide range of talent on it, as far as, you know, we have, like you said, Seal shows up there a couple of times fighting wolves in that one scene. Oh, and I have to mention, since we're talking about the different gags and things like that now, I really love I guess it's 2 scenes where the camera's not on, the lens cap is on, and there's the whole thing with the bees.
Oh yeah.
Oh, those are so brilliant. Those are some of the best
transcription
moments.
On scene.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I think that was the first time that joke really was done and like landed well. Was the we're going to sneakily put in a fantastic action scene, but not show you what it is, but it sounds good. And yeah, no, it worked really well. Yeah. He's got a flamethrower at the end.
Yeah. It makes me think there's a scene, there's a moment in 22 Jump Street where they're like driving this little car and they go through a building and they just come out the other side and they're like, oh man, did you see all that expensive stuff we destroyed? Kind of obviously poking fun at like they're saving money on the budget. And I love all that stuff. It's so much fun. And this is, you know, this movie wasn't cheap. It was $20 million, which is cheap considering the amount of people in the movie. But it's just also kind of a fun, creative way to keep things more contained financially and have just a really, those are really creative jokes. I love all that stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, same.
What do you think about the balance of the music with the narrative, like the balance of the fact that it's joke, narrative, song, and how they're able to craft a character arc from all of that? Because I don't know if you've seen the special features on the Blu-ray or anything, but they have so many deleted scenes. Like it feels like another movie's. It's like another, I don't know if it's an hour or something like that. There's a lot of deleted scenes of little bits and pieces, you know, more Joan Cusack and things like that just didn't fit with them trying to craft a story out of this. So how do you how well do you think the movie pulls that off, that balance between the music, the jokes, and also just having a story about Connor kind of reconnecting with himself and his friends?
Yeah, I think a lot of the jokes and a lot of the songs never stop the film. Because of the mockumentary format they decided to go with, there is a lot of freedom there, I think, to just like have a song for 3 minutes, but it's still relevant because then you got the interviewers kind of cutting into the song, talking about it, back to the song, and then you continue on like with the narrative after the release of that song. So I think the decision to make it a mockumentary really, really worked. I mean, if this was a straight musical, it would be a mess. It would be a real mess, I think, because you couldn't really have the songs that they wanted to make definitely like wouldn't have meshed with the story unless it was a mockumentary. And yeah, the deleted scenes, I've seen a couple of them, and some of the deleted songs as well. F You comes to mind as a favorite of mine.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Just having all the kids just chant that back. it's fun. Like they definitely cut out a lot, and I think you can tell because it's quite short. It's barely like 90 minutes, but it flows. It flows very well. Like way better than a lot of other comedies, especially from like 2016. I can't really think of any comedies that came out then. I'm pretty sure that that one with Zac Efron, where Zac Efron hires people to go with him to a wedding, came out in 2016.
I think so.
And that was the same length, I think, and it feels very slow, whereas this feels incredibly fast paced. And I think it's just 'cause they shot a lot, had to cut a lot out, just made it a little bit more speedy in the watch, which is the way to do it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the approach that they have with their music as well. I mean, they barely have any songs on this album or really any of their albums that go much more past 2.5 minutes or so. I think there's a real risk there to, drag out the gag and then kind of deflate whatever momentum you've had going on. But I think this kind of movie doesn't really get a lot of credit often for how crucial editing is for this. Like I can imagine, a lot of this is the talking heads and or just Connor and or his two friends, the other Style Boys, the other Lonely Island people, and it's really to produce it must have been not that hard to film everything because you're shooting all the the interviews and then intercutting it, but it's just like how crafting a story out of that and not having it just be a string of interviews. I think it's a real skill that they're able to pull off here, and it's not the level of filmmaking that it takes to do something like that is, I think, really underappreciated or undervalued a lot of times. That they're able to tell a story of Connor's fall and then kind of rise again, which again is kind of it is kind of a very tropey biopic musical biopic thing that we've seen in a million movies, and which most of them kind of fall flat and fall into that trap of, well, okay, they're really, really good, and then they have a substance abuse problem, and then it all comes crashing down, and then they get into rehab. And I think Rocket Man this year being a one rare example of a movie that actually able to transcend that and do something new with it. And this movie kind of hits some of those buttons as far as you have him where he is just depressed. He has his depressed period where he grows his beard and he goes out in public with his ridiculously fake nose, which we should mention. Sarah Silverman also great in this movie.
Fantastic.
So I really love that they're able to craft a real character story in addition to being hilarious and the music. And we should also say that Akiva and Jorma also a lot of fun in this film as well. I think it's easy to put everything on Andy Samberg, but they also directed this film, and I think that their performances really lend a lot to it.
Jorma's whole thing with his dead mouse head cracks me up every single time, and Akiva's story arc as well is really sweet. They did a great job. We were talking about the editing just before. The fact that they were able to make the whole part where Samberg goes to the farm and they have that heart-to-heart and it not feel kind of forced and not feel separate from the rest of the movie as well, for the editing to make that work. It was very impressive because that is such a key point in the film, but it's not really something that you would usually get in a mockumentary. Akiva's whole story arc I am a huge fan of. All the various sculptures that he makes as well are pretty funny, stuff like that.
Yeah, and then the true nature of his farm that we learn towards the end, which the whole movie there's like he's a farmer, but they never tell you what he's farming until like the third act, and of course that plays into their whole creative process. And I love the.
I just realized this came out in 2016, and only now in 2019 is South Park making fun of both what the farm is doing and music biopics.
Yeah, see,
they're just picking up on it now, ahead of its time.
I love the joke you made me think of it when you talking about Jorma with his giant mechanical head, where he says Connor's trying to sell him on it, and I think he asks Hunter or somebody his opinion, and he's like, "Oh yeah, it looks like the tip of Optimus Prime's dick," and Connor's like, "Yeah, don't you want to look like Optimus Prime?" And he's like, "His dick, Optimus Prime's dick," and I'm like things like that. It's just the movie finds a way to take its characters seriously even when they're being ridiculous, and I think that's why those moments on the farm and their reunion when he, of course. The classic movie dilemma: should I go on by myself to the Poppies, or should I make it a Style Boys reunion and bring my friends with me? That classic dilemma, where of course we know where that's going to go because this is a comedy and it's the way that these things play out. But you're emotionally invested in that happening, and when it happens, it's. I think that's the other reason why I like Incredible Thoughts is that it's a hilarious song and the concept behind it, but it's also representing like these people, this friendship kind of being mended, and it's in a way kind of a heartwarming scene at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
I love all of that. I don't know if I have too many more notes. Is there anything about Popstar Never Stop, Never Stopping that we haven't talked about? I feel like this is one of those films you can just kind of go on and on with, but I think we've hit a lot of the main highlights. Is there any gags or anything? Well, when he makes the what are they, pancakes or something, and he puts his own shit in them. I love that scene as well. And it plays into the people that he's surrounded himself with are really what his big problem is, and he's just like becoming aware of that in that moment and kind of recognizing the bubble that he's living in. I love that scene. That was really fun as well. Just the team around him is a lot of fun, and they work well with that. The basketball scene, for one, where he completely misses, and they're all like, "Yeah, you got it," and that is definitely one that comes to mind. We haven't mentioned Bill Hader's character as the roadie either. Yeah. I've become low key kind of obsessed with Bill Hader lately because of It Chapter 2, which I really liked. I know a lot of people didn't care for, but since then I've fallen down a rabbit hole with his SNL clips online, and so I'm just like in a Bill Hader zone lately. So I can't believe I didn't think about bringing him up here.
Oh yeah, I am a massive fan of Bill Hader. I quite liked It Chapter 2 as well. His HBO show Barry is incredible. It's very funny, but also like the cinematography is fantastic, especially in season 2. Like a very underrated show, I think, at the moment is Bill Hader's Barry. I mentioned Documentary Now as well. If you're a fan of Bill Hader, definitely check that out.
I know I'm considering it because that's definitely something that when I was looking into like what else has he done that I should probably check out, and I did see that was a part of it, and the fact that Fred Armisen is involved. That's one of the characters or one of the sketches of Bill Hader's that I've gotten back into recently is the Californians thing that they did on SNL with Fred Armisen. I love and him and everything. So now that'll be something that I'll like bug my wife with and be like, Devin, what are you doing here? Like she's like, oh, not this again. The Californians. This is so funny. Those two guys. Oh God, it's so good. Bill Hader is a genius.
Oh yeah, they're both fantastic together and separately as well. Yeah, the Californians is a sketch series I am always returning to and quoting. It's good fun. Big fan of that.
Yeah, and Bill and a lot of the SNL people here, like Bill Hader that you said, they show up. You get just like it's just like seasoning on the the already really solid base that the film has going with The Lonely Island. The fact that you get, here's a little Tim Meadows, here's a little Maya Rudolph, here's a little, Bill Hader and Kevin Nealon, even things like that. Will Forte, there's a little bit of people throughout. And I love, as someone who's on and off been a big fan of SNL, seeing the veterans kind of show up, and it adds a lot of flavor to kind of, not that this was, I don't know if I would consider this film really an ensemble, but it almost kind of feels like that in a way, even though the three main guys get the vast majority of the screen time. It feels like that because there's such a extensive like support network to help and kind of help the movie, help connect all the dots, basically. And I think, that's as far as the cameos, the characters in the movie, but also the interviews and everything. I think that it's kind of the interconnecting thread that keeps the Style Boys and Connor's story all focused and in line. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. And it comes like with the territory as well, with doing a music based thing like this. Like, you expect a lot of cameos. I think like Zoolander kind of ruined that, and now with every cameo, with every film that's like making fun of something in the art world, people expect cameos, and this did not disappoint, which was good. Yeah, the Maya Rudolph one, just that whole the whole like aqua spin scene in general is just one of my favorite parts. How it completely destroys all the electrical grids. Great. So, Sandro, unless you have anything else, can you tell people where they can find you on social media? Yeah. The podcast, Oldie But Goodie, that's on Facebook. It's on stuff. I am at Sandro Falce on everything, SandroFalce. That's me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, if anyone uses that. That sort of stuff is just my name, which is a good thing about having a name that is weird to spell like that, because no one else has taken it yet, so it's good.
Yeah, exactly. Capitalize on it. There you go. And the podcast is Oldie But Goodie. Definitely stop by if you're interested in hearing two Australian kids talking about movies, but also being very silly. It's a very silly podcast. And also a shout out to the podcast 99 from 99 as well for getting me in contact with you and this show. They pretty much introduced me to this, which was great. So yeah, definitely check them out as well for a more 90s movies nerdiness. Yeah, absolutely. I'm it's 2019, but the 90s are still my jam. I'm still always on, Spotify, 90s, whatever. So yeah, 90s cinema, 90s culture is always fun to revisit. So definitely people interested in doing that, check out both of those shows. And Sandro, I'm so glad we were able to talk about this movie. I know this conversation was kind of a while in the planning stages, on and off, just because life and intersecting schedules, times differences, for example, is a huge factor as well, because I'm recording this late in the evening, and it's probably afternoon, morning for you over there? It's just past 2:00 in the afternoon. Yeah. There you go. So, but yeah, I think this is definitely a fun movie that people who haven't seen Popstar, and it sounds like that number is shrinking rapidly. That makes me very happy. I think they should definitely check it out. It's not, I don't know if it's streaming anywhere. It was, like I said, it was on Netflix for a while. I don't know what the deal is with that, but I guarantee you that Blu-ray copies of it are probably very cheap on Amazon and just like overstocked with boxes of Popstar Blu-ray. So, it's definitely, I think, an easy blind buy if you can find it for like a few bucks. And just because it's I think it's turning into one of those like comfort movies for me in a way, when I just want to put on something just to kind of unplug and just like, even if it's in the background while I'm on the computer or whatever. And digital copies obviously help with this, where I could just go, because I have the Blu-ray and I can just pop it on my Movies Anywhere or whatever. Just because it is so rewatchable, and it's one of those comedies that I think do impart to the story, the music, the cast, and the cameos. I feel like you notice something new every time you watch it. Yeah, it's definitely up there, probably on par with like Wet Hot American Summer, which is another comedy that I find myself returning to at least once a year. It's definitely on that level for me, Because it's one that, like, there are definitely some comedies where like you watch it a couple times and the jokes just don't hit as hard. Some films come to mind. I probably won't mention them. But like What We Do in the Shadows is a movie that I absolutely adore. But after a little while, it doesn't hit too hard. You got to kind of like give yourself a little bit of a break on it when it comes to rewatching. Whereas I've never found that with this, or with any Lonely Island related stuff in general. All of their songs just always return back to it, and they're always as good as the last time.
Yeah. I think that, this conversation is making me want to go and either put on Popstar or put on the Bash Brothers for a little bit and just kind of unwind to that. Just because I love their creative voice, and I hope that the fact that this movie didn't do well in theaters doesn't significantly like hurt their chances of getting a chance to do another feature length project. Because I think this movie is already gaining steam just a few years after its failed theatrical release, and I'm sure that they can come up with something equally memorable. So hopefully we'll get to see that in the next few years.
Yeah, for sure. Even if it's like a Netflix movie, I know that they were involved in Tim Robinson's sketch series that dropped a little earlier in the year. I Think You Should Leave, I think it was called.
Yeah,
like they were involved in that, and that was a bit of a runaway hit as well. So even if it's like a Netflix movie, I think they should definitely try and get another one out. I think it'd be a lot of fun. Yeah,
Netflix, if you're listening to this podcast, which would be really awesome if you are, sign Lonely Island to one of those Adam Sandler sized deals, and I guarantee they'll probably come up with more consistent quality stuff than Adam Sandler would. But that's a talk for another day. Sandro, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about this. I would love to have you back at some point. I'm rounding off the recording for 2019, but 2020 we'll definitely talk about getting you back on here to talk about another film.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, that would be great. Maybe just do something serious next time.
Yeah, mix it up. There you go.
Do something bad and serious, not good and funny.
Like The Room? That makes me think of The Room. Bad, serious.
That definitely that checks out. Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun, and it has been a while in the making, but it's been good to record with you. We'll have to try and get you on my show as well. We don't really do international guests. Actually, we haven't done an international guest on this on our show yet, so we'll have to try and get that working next year as well. That'd be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me know.
Will do. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Sandro.
If you're interested in joining me on the show to chat about one of your favorite films, head on over to crookedtable.com/guest. Or you can consider supporting the show at patreon.com/crookedtable. Of course, you can always find more podcasts, reviews, videos, and other movie-related goodies over at crookedtable.com. Until next time, this has been the Crooked Table Podcast, and I've been Rob.
This has been a production of crookedtable.com. All rights reserved.
CROOKED.